All right, welcome to Defeating Adventism number 22. And in the previous video, which was not Defeating Adventism, it was Mormonism, I promised that Adventists that you would be next in the Racism series that's going to be continuing even after this one. After this, I expect I'll do another video on the racism of Seventh-day Adventism. But we're going to start here and now. Here's what we're going to look at in this video. We're going to actually do a very sad account of a woman who passed away in the 1940s. So we're going to go back in history and do that. So before we launch off into that, I'm going to tell you what we're going to be examining. We're going to be examining first the account here in this book, Light Bearers to Freedom, Light Bearers to the Remnant. It says it's a college textbook, 1979. This is all going to be really important later on because I'm probably going to mention it again. We're going to look at a Spectre magazine issue that I have electronically. We're also going to, I'm going to make reference to a video from the Black SDA history that's on YouTube. I'll give you a link to that. You'll see that. And we're going to start the whole thing off by looking at the Seventh-day Adventist brand new, at least this recording, semi-brand new, online encyclopedia. So let's begin here, begin now with this, I think, most solemn and sad account in Adventism history. And we begin here exactly where I said we would leave off, and that is we begin here at the brand new Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists. Now, we have the page here you can see. I'm going to scroll down this page, and we're going to look at what this encyclopedia says about itself. And it says a couple things about it. I mean, you could read all this if you want, just pause and read. I'm just going to hit a few areas. One is, it says what? It's a great tool, not only for those seeking to learn more about the church. Wonderful. You're gonna tell me things. It's a global church project too. I mean, it says everything about how diverse, and in other words, they got it from people from all over the world, etc. So, okay, they're building this up because it's the great tool that they say it is. Every article is what? Freshly researched and written. Okay, let's test that. They got some goals. Let's just look at a couple of them. One is what? Supply reliable, authoritative information on Adventist history. Crucial events and themes. We're going to be looking at a crucial event. Organizations, entities, institutions, people. They go on to say they provide a reference work to those new to the Adventist faith and not of the Adventist faith to learn aspects of Adventism. Well, okay, you would expect something called an encyclopedia to be sort of what they describe here. Researched, comprehensive, etc. So, I searched the Adventist Encyclopedia for the name Lucy Bard or Lucille Bard. And this is all you get here on Lucy Bard. You don't even get a full sentence in terms of history because it ends in a comma. And the red portion here says what? Lucille Spence, whose refusal for treatment to an Adventist hospital was the catalyst for the organization of regional conferences. Boy, look at what they don't tell you. Regional black conferences is what it was the catalyst for. Refusal for treatment? Because she was black, going to a white Adventist hospital. And there's so many more details here. This is all the details they give you in this well-researched and well-written Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists. And they go on to give you biographical information about her for the remainder of it. Like I said, she doesn't even merit a full sentence in this whole encyclopedia entry. So we got to ask ourselves, you should be asking yourself, especially if you're an Adventist, okay, what really happened? Now, as I showed you in the previous video, I'm going to be using this book. You can see here what? It's a denominational history book for college classes. 1979. You know what? To find out what really happened, we have to go back over 40 years to this college book, which I don't even know if Adventist educational institutions use anymore or not. But we have to go back to this and to get the actual event, because the brand new encyclopedia doesn't give us the facts. We're going to look in this college textbook on this page here, 566. We're going to look at this paragraph. I'm going to blow it up for you on the next page. And we're going to go through it like 3 sections at a time. So read along with me here. Let's just start from the top. In the fall of 1943, an incident at the Seventh-day Adventist Washington Sanitarium fanned smoldering discontent into a blaze. Lucy Bard, a light-skinned mulatto, was brought by her husband to the sanitarium during an illness. The Bards were longtime members of an Adventist church in New York City. Let's keep reading. At first, Miss Bard was admitted, but later, when her racial identity was learned from the admittance forms, the Bards were told that a mistake had been made. Lucy was wheeled into the hall, where the sanitarium switchboard attempted to locate another hospital that would admit her. Eventually taken to Freedman's Hospital, Miss Bard died. Lucy Bard's life as a sacrifice to the church policy of racial exclusiveness. An effort by W.G. Turner, Vice President in North America, to diffuse the situation through the Sabbath sermon on 1 Peter 4:12. He did the Sabbath sermon, Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened to you. He preached this to them, only made matters worse. After the close of the Sabbath, October 16, 1943, a group of Ephesus laymen met and organized the National Association for the Advancement of Worldwide Work Among Colored Seventh-day Adventists, and they went on and do this. You know what the point is? It's this here. If you're black, you are not allowed to be admitted into the all-white Seventh-day Adventist sanitariums. Because you talk about intense racial segregation. Boy, welcome to Seventh-day Adventism. Now, the previous video to this one was on the racism in Mormonism. Well, the racism here in Seventh-day Adventism is not quite as bad as it is in Mormonism, but it's bad. And this old-fashioned sign here, no colored allowed, as far as I know, it wasn't on the door of the sanitarium, but boy, it was in everybody's hearts at the sanitarium. Just to give you a little look back in history, here's a picture of that sanitarium taken, they said, circa 1918, 1928. I'd venture to say that there's a good probably 20% of the people that you see in this picture here were there when Lucy Bard showed up in the 1940s at the sanitarium. So, these next 6 slides, and there's going to be copies of actual letters from a number of key people, come from this video, which, and you can see here, you can see here on the bottom, it's a YouTube video, a Black SDA History, and there's the link to it. The people behind this did and they're all faithful Seventh-day Adventists, did an excellent job. Now, that usually does not happen in all the false religions I study. When you have a controversy like this, facts get erased, reinvented, covered up, hidden, etc. And, well, they do. Just read the Adventist Encyclopedia. So far, you already know more from this 40-year-old college textbook than the Adventist Encyclopedia is telling you. But the gentleman behind this video, I thought, did an outstanding job of telling the truth. I did a lot of research on this video before I put it here, and that's why I'm able to make that statement. He told the truth. And for Seventh-day Adventists to tell the truth about something that is not so flattering, kudos to him, because that's what he did. Now, my other question is, why are you still an Adventist? But anyway, let's look at the next 6 slides. What we have here, now you know the account, right? Lucy Bard went to the sanitarium, Washington, D.C., and they said, uh-oh, you're black. We can't admit you because it's a white sanitarium. Now, what we have here is a letter by, and you see a picture here, this is Lucy Bard's husband. And at the bottom, you can see it's signed by James Bard. So this is Lucy's husband. He sent it to Elder G.H. Peters, Secretary of the North American Colored Department. And he says this. He's talking about when he and his wife arrived to the sanitarium. He's retelling this incident. And he's telling an incident here about an attendant. He doesn't even name the person, an attendant. And the attendant, returned shortly. That's after they showed up. And he called me into the office and told me that he regretted to say this,
but it was against the law to the state of Maryland to admit colored people into the sanitarium. Then he goes on to say in the letter here, this is James Bard retelling the incident. He says, I, of course, was stunned, for my wife had been looking forward with much anticipation to going to this particular sanitarium because she felt that she would be among her people. No kidding. An Adventist going to an Adventist sanitarium is to be with her people. Now, you would think that's what would happen. But here's the story. Now, look at the top of this here. I want you to remember this account, because you're going to read a conflicting version later from a leader in the Adventist church. Now we have James Bard telling us what happened. What happened? He showed up, an attendant came and said, basically, you got to go. The attendant then continued what? The attendant recommended me to Freedman's Hospital and assured me that she would be accepted there. He called a taxi, told the driver the hospital to take us to, and my wife and I were driven away. So he got the account. We showed up, didn't even get admitted, didn't even talk to anybody, but an attendant who called a cab took us away. That so outraged the SDA Jamaican Church in Long Island that this letter you see before you, they sent it to Elder McElhaney. And you can see James Bard's signature here on the letter, along with a number of prominent members of the Jamaican SDA Church in New York. This letter here was written 5 days before Lucy Bard died. So she was admitted to Freedman's Hospital, but in 5 days she was going to die. And they were so incensed. You can see the blue arrow here. They said what? In other words, if you don't pay immediately for her health care because you rejected her, we are going to sue you for damages. So they were serious and they were upset. And no kidding, wouldn't you? You would think, as you saw in James Bard's letter, as Lucy Bard said that she was going to be among her people. It was her people who rejected her. Now we're going to look at another letter. Lucy Bard at this point has been dead for 2 weeks. And it's now been about 54 days since she was actually rejected from the white Seventh-day Adventist hospital. So what we have here is the sanitarium director, Dr. Robert Hare, and he's writing to J.L. McElhaney. And this is what he says in that letter. So he says, not knowing that she was colored, I advised that we receive her into the institution, giving her a private room, and arrange for her meals to be sent on trays. You know why that meals were sent on trays? Because she's black, and black people can't eat in the mess hall with white people. Then he says this, that we would diagnose her with physicians off-duty hours, kind of like, hidden. And then he says what? I learned then that she and her husband had refused to accept our offer of a private room and gone to Freedman's Hospital. Really? Someone here is lying. You can read the account in the 40-year-old history book I showed you, The Light Bearers to the Remnant. Go back and read James Bard's letter, because these accounts don't line up. Somebody here is lying. And you know what? I'm going to throw my cards on the table and say, you know who I think is lying? This guy you see in this picture here in front of you in your screen. I think it's Sanitarium Medical Director Dr. Robert Hare who's lying to you right now in this letter. Now, do I know? I really don't know, because no one's really actually come out and said that, they are the one that are owning up to the falsehood. But if I had to make a wager or a bet and pick somebody, this guy. This is the one here that lied. Yeah, Seventh-day Adventists, right? The keepers of the commandments, the remnant church. Well done. Let's look at this next letter. We have W.E. Nelson. He's the General Conference Treasurer. He's replying to a letter from Dr. Hare that we don't have. So here he's got this conversation going on with Dr. Hare. And here's what he says in it. He says, it would not, I'll read this because it might be kind of hard to read on screen. It would be absolutely disastrous at the present time for the Washington Sanitarium to carry a mixed clientele. Now, why would it be disastrous? Now, he's talking to Dr. Hare. He says, you mentioned that patients from Carolinas, North and South Carolina, and Virginia would object. But I believe patients from the District of Columbia and Maryland and from every other state would also object. In other words, they would also object to racially integrated clientele at the sanitarium. He goes on to say, the psychology, this should be offensive to everybody, The psychology of these black people is so different from the white that it would be impossible for us to mix with them. You ought to read that again. Look at the picture here on your screen. This is your General Conference Treasurer and D.C. Sanitarium Board Member, W.E. Nelson. Yeah, the remnant church, the keeper of the commandments, and just blatant racism you see underlined in red here in front of you. But let's continue, because he continues. Dr. Hare, it is not a matter of the colored people wanting a little sanitarium of their own where they can receive attention, but what they want is racial and social equality. And you know what? And that's what he doesn't want to give them. You saw what he said there. What? The psychology of these black people is so different from that of the white, it's impossible to mix with them. Wow. Yeah, keeper of the commandments, General Conference, your leadership, Seventh-day Adventists. So, what we have here now is an 8-page, they called it a manifesto of the Jim Crow characteristics, the racist characteristics of the Adventist Church. What you have here is a screenshot of just one of the pages with the actual physical edits by J.L. McElhaney on this document. But this document was put together by a group of black Adventists who were just absolutely incensed with the rejection of Lucy Bard from a sanitarium, because mainly, for what reason? Because she's black. And then sending her to another hospital where she then died. So, 38 days after being expelled from the hospital, Lucy Bard died. That did not end the controversy of the black American Seventh-day Adventists and the unjust racial treatment that the remnant church gave them. Again, think of that encyclopedia we just looked at. Even think about, I've just scratched the surface here. There's even more to learn about this. And what the encyclopedia, the well-researched encyclopedia, does not tell you any of this. Spectrum Magazine. Some of you, especially if you're Adventists, will know that Spectrum Magazine, not an official publication of the church, but we're going to look at these yellow sections here. We're going to do each one in a blown-up fashion. So let's look here at the top of the page. You can see I'm circling my mouse pointer. It says, in this environment, the almost predictable incident catalyzing a charge in relations between black and white Adventists occurred. A black Adventist woman visiting relatives in Washington, D.C. suddenly fell ill. Her sister drove her to the closest Adventist hospital, the Washington Sanitarium, which you already know. The emergency room staff refused to care for a black patient. The desperate sister drove her to Freedman's Hospital in another part of the city, but before they arrived, her visiting sister died. The black press reported the incident to the country. Outraged black Adventists organized a committee for the advancement of worldwide work among colored Seventh-day Adventists. Just read this account in this section right here, and go back to that account by the sanitarium medical director about, oh look, we're going to give you a private room, doctor's going to see you off limits, we'll give you your food in trays because you can't eat with the white people in the room, but oh, you refuse that. That gentleman was not truthful. Let's continue on with this article here in Spectrum Magazine. 3 principal demands were made. Integration of Adventist institutions, greater black representation at all levels, denominational administration, greater accountability from the leadership of the black members, because you know what, they're contributing financially to the church. And did they? And the church knew that. The General Conference leaders informed the assembled group that integration on the scale that they wanted, can't do it. Impossible. Instead, McElhaney proposed meeting an old demand, a 1929 demand by J.K. Humphrey, to create black conferences. So now if you ever wonder why you got black conferences, it's because Seventh-day Adventists, their racist activities at the sanitarium hospital to Lucy Bard created such a divide, and they saw as an act of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but to try to soften their racism, they consent to black conferences. Because they said what? They go on to say integration was unattainable, but there could be increased self-determination by the black clergy. The 1944 Spring Council, GC that is, met immediately afterwards. They approved black conferences. They voted to elevate the Oakwood to a senior, they upped it to a senior college status, appointed a Mr. Lewis H. Reynolds to be the first black editor of The Message. Now they got their own magazine. They got their own segregated college. They got their own segregated magazine. They got their own segregated conferences. Blacks were just segregated, period, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And you know what? It wasn't like that everywhere in the United States at that time. Yeah, sure, there were other denominations that were segregated, but not everyone was. So what we have here now, I think is just, this is so sad. Here's Miss Lucy Bard in the middle here with friends and family. Let's end it right here. She died October 30th, 1943. You know what I always say to Adventists on my YouTube comments? Seventh-day Adventists love to tell me, as I've already said in the video a number of times, oh, we're the ones who keep the commandments. Well, you know what Seventh-day Adventists don't ever really realize? Is that Jesus has commandments, and many more than 10, and that are not the 10 commandments, but go beyond the 10 commandments. You know what? Adventists, you always say, oh, we believe the Bible and the Bible. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because if you did, you would believe this verse right here, John 13:34. A new commandment I give unto you. This is Jesus. That you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Just think about the love that Lucy Bard got from her remnant fellow Seventh-day Adventist members. That's some love, isn't it? Jesus here says, I got a new commandment. You love one another as I loved you. No love for Lucy Bard. Second and last, 1 John 3:23. Again, this is Jesus, and this is his. His is Jesus. His commandment, that we should believe on the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as he gave us commandment. Seventh-day Adventists, your leadership absolutely failed the Holy Scriptures in the book of John and the book of 1 John, because you don't even realize that Jesus has commandments. And Jesus told us, here's 2 of his commandments, to love one another. And Lucy didn't get that. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church today still remains, in some measure, a segregated church, with black conferences still in existence today.